very good afternoon to all. I am Dr. Aman Shahani and I humbly welcome you to the fourth featured speech titled Need for Standardized Assessment for English Curriculum in the 9 Asian Countries and Regions. All right, so welcome to the fourth featured speech titled Need for Standardized Assessment for English Curriculum in 9 Asian Countries and Regions. Our speaker today is Dr. Saloni Priya, and Saloni ma'am is the Dean in Vivekananda School of English Studies, and she's also in Students' Welfare in Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies, Delhi. She has a bachelor's degree in English honors from TM Bangalpur University and MA, MPhil and PhD degree in linguistics from JNU. With linguistics and English both being embedded deep in her roots, she has a penchant for teaching English language. She has about 19 years of experience in teaching and research. She has also conducted many FDPs, orientation courses, workshops on academic research and writing organized by MHRD, UGC, and Indian Institute of Dalit Studies, All India University Association, JNU, and others. Apart from teaching, she has been actively involved in scripting and providing voiceovers. Welcome to this session, ma'am. And I welcome you to start this session and enlighten us with your talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shani. I won't be taking much time. I'll just start with my presentation. I know we have had stalwarts today in applied linguists, and it was a pleasure to hear all of them. So the topic for my featured presentation today is secondary school assessment for English curriculum in Asia, the need for reform. This presentation is an outcome of the research project under AsiaTEFL 2021 platform, as already deliberated upon by Professor Masaki Oda in the first featured speech that he delivered yesterday. I'm privileged and honored to be a part of such prestigious research team, which is headed by Professor Chi-Fong Wen, and the team has very accomplished applied linguists from the Asian fraternity. As you would have gathered from the other featured talks, both yesterday and today, we saw Phyllis Chu also, she's also part of the same research team. So all these talks are comparative studies of the 9 countries and regions in continuum with respect to the English language curriculum, the objectives, the design, the methodology, the standardization, assessment, etc. So now coming to my topic, that is language testing and assessment, you all know is an important aspect of language teaching. Language teaching and testing, they coexist in tandem. Test is not only an indicator of students' performance, it decides the success and failure of the overall language teaching program per se and the policy. So the importance of assessment as a positive backwash effect on teaching learning curriculum, of course, cannot be denied. And testing in Asia, if you see, it enjoys an exalted position. And if you look at the roots of testing, it's in the Chinese soil. So most of the Asian countries have developed English language tests at the local, regional, and national levels as well. So the focus of my talk today, as you see, I would talk a little bit on assessment and curriculum. The 9 countries and regions which are part of this project would be dealt in detail in terms of the secondary school examinations, the assessment patterns, and then some reflections as part of this research study that we have. So English language teaching across the world, and especially in Asia, where it is taught maybe as EFL or as an English for specific purposes, as in English as a foreign language, it has undergone a sea change in terms of curriculum, methods, approach. Even though there have been changes in the national curriculum, English achievement tests have been relatively unchanged. So the 4 skills to be tested in English language assessment, as in any other language, that is listening, speaking, reading, writing, have not been tested uniformly across most of the Asian countries. And we all know the reasons, what the reasons that are very many reasons in terms of the culture, multilingualism and things like that, that would be part of my discussion as well. So when I analyze the test items that I've received from my fellow researchers from these various 9 countries and regions, the various national level tests at the secondary level of school education, through this research, it tries to evaluate English language assessment in these countries and regions. And I'll mention the countries and regions once again. It's China, Japan, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, South Korea, Thailand, Singapore, and Hong Kong. So the main focus, as you have seen, the talk would be around these lines. So now when we talk about testing and evaluation is a continuous process in language teaching curriculum. And in language teaching for that matter, and curriculum design, it gives a key status to evaluation. And it is regarded as one of the major tasks during curriculum design. And it is through evaluation that an assessment is done, and tests are the tools for both evaluating and assessing. So there's a difference in testing versus assessment. If we see that assessment is distinguished from testing, as it covers as much a broader cycle of activities. And according to Green, if we see, testing is an event planned to elicit a performance, whereas assessment is a combination, you could say, of deciding the test criteria and content, maybe of scoring, score interpretation, and decisions regarding the score justification as well. So there are many stages of the assessment cycle, as outlined by many links. So it could be designing it, producing, organizing, or being as an administrator of that test, or the SSE, or the scorer, the user, the validator. We are not talking in length about all of those, but as I see, the Cambridge English Language Assessment, it has been a pioneer in language teaching. And it's more than a century, and it has been delivering excellence and innovation, and is often seen as an international benchmark. So the tests in the Asian countries and regions in this study, it also tried to see whether the test followed or adhered to some international standard or benchmark, or did they have their own national criteria. So broadly, the purpose of assessment, which we all know can be of two categories, it could be done either for rating the student or rating the system. So it could help in getting information related to the individual's performance, or evaluating the system corresponding to summative assessment and formative assessment respectively. So assessments can have a series of additional purposes, like that of selection, maybe placement, maybe diagnosis, maybe the support for learning. So while we discuss the various types of language tests, we do agree that any test is meant to measure the ability. So, however, for any test development, it is essential to know the purpose and objective of the test. That is, where would the test score lead to? Whether the inference from the result would lead to a decision regarding maybe a higher class or a higher level, or maybe a placement, maybe a job, or determining the formative or summative assessment, that is the achievement test, or maybe it's simply instrumental in determining the ability levels of the students and grading them into different ability aspects. But whatever said, the testing, when we look at the testing and the types of testing, there are very many functions, and the language test today, if we see, amongst various other functions, mostly they give entry to students into international education, which many speakers have been speaking about. So where they have to study through the medium of second language, which is mostly English. It's a global language. So despite the multiculturalism and all those aspects, we cannot deny the fact that it is a global language. The occupational tests, if we see, they are keys to many job openings. And there are different types of tests now, and we won't go much deeper into it, but different approaches as well. We have objective tests, we have subjective tests, we have direct tests, we have indirect tests, we have discrete point tests, we have integrative tests, and now talking about LSRW and integrative tests, which will come to see as it is taken care of. Some nations, some regions have an integrated approach in language testing. Then we also have criterion reference tests and norm reference tests. So criterion reference tests, like which measure achievement on the basis of the degree of mastery of a prescribed domain or criteria, or maybe it's a set of a learning outcome. On that basis, it measures. Whereas there's a norm reference test, which tests the test which evaluate performance of test takers on the basis of relative achievement. So it's basically the percentile score, or these many seats are there, only top 10 scorers or top 100 scorers would. So the non-reference test is in relation to the others taking the same test. So it's a relative achievement. Then we have speed tests, we have power tests. So we see that there are different types of tests, and ones that come to the forefront are proficiency test or progress test or achievement test, which mainly would be discussed in the talk today. So the different stages of language test development also we cannot deny, and there has to be test classifications. We should know what we are testing for, and then only a good test can be developed. So the stages, when we talk about the stages in language testing or the eras of language testing, and as identified by Spolsky, it's the pre-scientific, the psychometric structuralist, and the psycholinguistic, sociolinguistic. So we were honored actually to listen to Spolsky yesterday for his plenary talk, when the psychometric structuralist, when we talk about him, what comes to our mind is the psychometric structuralist approach, how it was developed by him, and how it was focused by Lado, and it has gradually metamorphosed into psycholinguistic, sociolinguistic era in a span of about 20 years from his work. Modern language testing, if we see, by Rebecca Vellet, which was, it came out in 1967, and it showcased a wide range of testing techniques which had their roots in the prevalent teaching and testing theories of the mid-1960s. We won't get much into detail, but what is the focus here and what we need to emphasize upon is that when we look at the various language teaching methods which have been listed in by very many applied linguists, we can see that it can be clustered as representatives of three major trends in the past 100 to 120 years. And it has been done by Narang in 2006, when she has the three prominent representations of language teaching methods. She stated that it's marked by the major paradigm shifts. And these shifts, first we saw the grammar translation method, which included grammar methods and deductive approaches. And they continued since the 18th and the 19th century and very well into the 20th century. The focus there was on the information about the language, that is, rules of grammar that the students were expected to learn and apply. And it was accompanied by translation exercises using learners' native language, and hence bilingual methods with intensive information and training in grammar. That was the trend there. Then came the direct methods and various drill methods, which focused on habit formation and reflex conditioning since the 30s and 40s in the 20th century. So 1930s and 1940s, it was full of those. The focus is again on the form, but the rules are expected to be internalized by a process of inductive generalization by the learner. The expectation from the learner is to arrive at the grammar rules. Then we also see learner-centered, communicative, function-oriented theories and approaches, which are the result of these two trends which I've just spoken about, which is grammar translation or direct methods. And in response to both these grammar translation and direct method, this communicative functional approach came. So one is on the theoretical front, where there's a major shift from the focus on the structure of language, that is form and content, to focus on the learner and the process of learning. So on the applied side, in actual language teaching classroom, the shift is now from discrete point, structure-oriented drill methods and exercises to communicative function-oriented, integrative task-based approaches. So as teaching methods we see have changed and evolved, so has the field of testing. So the development of the field of language testing in 1960s and 1980s, it corresponds to the changes in the language teaching arena. And these changes in language testing have been analyzed in depth by Spolsky and Vellet. And what we see is that there have been two major paradigm shifts, which you see in slide here as well, in language teaching. The first being from grammar translation method or pre-structural linguistics to direct method or structural and descriptive studies. And the second shift is from behavioral and structural linguistics to transformational generative, that is the TG model. So the changing trend in applied linguistics and language teaching would mirror reciprocally in language testing as well. So that we need to see whether with the change in curriculum, change in methodology, change in pedagogy, have the testing patterns changed or not. So as we have seen that language assessment is rather a complex process, so there are different stakeholders which we all realize, which we know that right from the policy makers to language teachers to researchers to instructors to students. So policy makers, if you see here, this is it has been sourced out from Taylor 2013. So if you look at here this diagram, the policy makers here is at the they are at the periphery, and we see that it is the researcher and the test designers who are at the core. We see here, according to Taylor, that it is the researchers and the test makers, and when we look at the course instructors and the language teachers, they are somewhat placed in the medial, in the intermediary layer. So Davis was of the view that language testing and applied linguistics were not essentially related. Rather, they did not showcase any relation, as many language testers came from areas which had no connection with applied linguistics. A language tester could be a psychometrician, an assessor, an institution, or at times he or she could be a linguist, a language teacher, or a trainer, a language theorist, or a practitioner. So it is the prevalent socio-linguistic view of language in the 1970s which characterized it as purposeful and context related. If you look at the diagram here, it talks about language assessment literacy for test makers. If you see the D part, it has again been sourced from Taylor 2013. So we see that a language test maker has to be all encompassing of whether it's a knowledge of theory, whether it's score and decision making, whether it's personal belief and attitudes, local practices, culture, social and cultural values, language pedagogy, principles and concepts. So he or she has to know, he has to be a master in all in order to be an effective language test maker. Now coming to the main focus, what I am going to talk today, the study that I have done on these 9 countries and regions. So as we have been giving these featured presentation as part of the AsiaTEFL 2021 project, which you have seen, which has researchers from these 9 countries and regions. And my talk would feature on the study done in these countries, wherein the inputs were received from my fellow research colleagues from these countries and regions, and based on regular monthly meetings for the past 7 to 8 months, deliberations, focused discussions, and interview questionnaires, which mainly ask questions like whether the national education system was centralized or decentralized, whether the grades, what were the grades that fell under the secondary school, and where more or less it was the same 7th to 12th grades which fell under the secondary school parameter, and what was the usual age group under secondary school education, and the nomenclature or the name that these countries or regions used for secondary education. So everywhere it was not called secondary education. So, and whether English was a compulsory subject in secondary school, and whether there were public examinations that the students took during secondary school, and in which classes or which grades were they to take these examinations. And English being a part of these public examinations also was again another question there. And the skills that were tested for English language was again another focus area, whether LSRW, that is listening, speaking, reading, writing, all 4 skills were tested, or just the receptive skills were tested. So that was again an important question. And the testing agency, which was very important, like whether they had a centralized testing agency, or it was a school-based exam or regional or provincial exams, and whether they were adhering to some international standard or benchmark. So the examination, who was the question paper setter, or whether the evaluation process was centralized or not, and the types of questions that were part of the testing, whether it was MCQs or closed test or a gap fill, open-ended, descriptive, etc. So those were the part of the questionnaire. And the one question that focused on whether the shift in curriculum is also reflected in testing. So whether the English language exam at secondary school level did undergo any major shift or change with the changing pattern in curriculum was again another. So I'll just take each of these country and regions one by one. So my fellow research colleagues were very helpful in providing me with sample question papers of English language or secondary school examination. So here the sample papers, because I could not have it uniformly for 10th grade, because the public exams, it differed in different countries and regions. So it was either 9th grade, 10th grade or 11th grade, as the case was different at different places. So beginning with China, when we analyze the questionnaire, so the national education system is centralized in China, and the grades that fall under secondary school, we see it is 7th to 9th for junior high and 10th to 12th for senior high. And the usual age group under secondary school education is 12 to 18 years or 17 years old. And the nomenclature or the name for secondary education is Zongqiu. And English is a compulsory subject there. And the exams that they take, it's Zongkao, that is the end. They do not have an achievement test based on, like, if you have to pass grade 9, because that exam is conducted at grade 9. But Zongkao as an entrance examination for high school for 9th grade students, and Gaokao, which is for the university entrance exam for 12th grade students. So when you have to enter a higher level, it is an entrance exam rather than an exit exam. So that also makes a little bit of a difference there, because the countries that are having entrance exams based on what they have studied to go into a higher level is China and Japan that we have come across. And as you see, the next country that I discuss is Japan here. So English was part of the public examination there. And at the end of 9th grade, as you have seen, they had Zongkao, and at the end of 12th grade, there was Gaokao. And the testing agency was a Bureau of Education of the local city. And the international standard, the question on international standard and benchmark, if any, is followed. There wasn't none. They had their own national parameters, and the examination conducted at the central level and the state level or regional level. So Zongkao was at the regional level, and Gaokao was at the central level. The question paper setter usually was a committee consisting of senior teachers, and Jian Yuan, a non-higher education teacher educator, mostly was the question paper setter, and the evaluation process was rather centralized, and the types of questions that were there, it was various in different cities and provinces, because it was not one national standard that was there. So they had, though the types of questions were almost the same. It was MCQs, closed test, translation, gap filling, completing dialogue, writing, etc. But the question paper was not one standard. There were different provinces which had their own question papers. So in the EFL context of China, students in higher education, though they have very limited command in second language English as compared to the L1, that is for academic literacies, but as universities are becoming more globalized, many of them have established English centers to empower non-native English speaking students, parallel to what is followed in Hong Kong and Singapore. And Chinese students score very high, really high on grammar-based tests, but when they are tested in constructed response or free composition items, they fail miserably as they are unable to write free compositions in English. So now coming next to Japan. So the national education system, whether it's centralized or decentralized, the question, the answer was, while the government emphasizes autonomy of teachers, the schools and regions, it is rather centralized. So despite the government emphasizing autonomy in various places for the teachers, for schools and regions, still it has a control in terms of having it in a centralized way. And the grades that fall under secondary school, 7 to 9, is the lower secondary school, which is compulsory, and the 10 to 12, which is the upper secondary school, is optional. However, more than 95% of the Japanese students, they go to upper secondary schools. And the usual age group, which is almost similar in all these countries and regions, obviously it's 12 to 18 here. And the nomenclature or the name for secondary education in Japan is Chugakao, which literally means middle school. But the official English translation is lower secondary school. And Koto Gakao, which literally means high school, but the official English translation is upper secondary school. So So English as a compulsory subject in secondary school, though it's a foreign language, it is compulsory. So it is somewhat a de facto compulsory subject, and most schools offer English as their only as a foreign language subject. So it becomes a de facto compulsory subject there. And regarding the public examinations during secondary school, it is not a public exam. So the school itself employs a semester system. So there's no large-scale exam. The school employs its own school-based exam, and they usually have midterm and final exams each semester. So it comes to 4 times a year. And if the school uses trimester system, the students take exams 6 times a year. So there's no large-scale exam to graduate at each level in Japan, you see. But then when we talk about the public exams, they do not have any kind of public exams which most countries have. Rather, they have entrance exams, as we had seen in China. So entrance exams for the next level, partially which serves as a public exam in other cases. So they do not have anything like 10th or 11th or 9th grade exam, but the exams that they have is entrance exam. And these entrance exams, they test the receptive skills only. So not all 4 skills, LSRW is tested, but it's only the receptive skills tested here. And the international standard or benchmark that is followed here in Japan, it's the mass media, what's there circulated in mass media, it talks about PISA and CEFR, but there's no systematic guidelines. Even in TOEFL and IELTS scores are often used as benchmark as well. So the examination, if you look at the examination, the question paper setter again then becomes not applicable here because it's a school that conducts it, and since it's not a centralized conduction of exams, so is the evaluation also not centralized. And the types of question, it varies, it ranges, it's MCQs, it's closed test, and all of them are there in the entrance exam. And again, it varies on which university conducts those. So the language exam at secondary school level, if I see if it has undergone any major shifts or change with the change in curriculum pattern, so there isn't very clear-cut answer to that, because the national guidelines we see are followed, and upper secondary school entrance exam, the questions come from the guideline for lower secondary school, and that it is followed there. Now coming to South Korea, it is a centralized education system. 7 to 9 grade is the middle school, and high school is 10 to 12. And the age group is 12 to 14 years in middle school and 15 to 18 years in high school. And the nomenclature for secondary education in the country, they call it Jungyong, which means secondary education. And English is a compulsory subject there. And there's very interesting answer in terms of the public examinations, what the students take during the secondary school year. Each year, 3% of students in the 9th and 11th grades, not all, it's only 3% of the students, and they are selected by random sampling. Only those students, only this 3% in 9th and 11th grade, they take the national assessment test. And there are 4 grades, which is a level 1 to 4, and English is a part of public examination, but you see not all of them take the English exams. So the skills that are tested in English language in this examination is listening and reading, and the testing agency is Korea Institute of Curriculum and Evaluation, which is KAIS, and the international standard or benchmark not be ascertained clearly, and the tests are conducted at national level. The question paper setter is the university professors and secondary school teachers, and the evaluation is also centralized. The types of questions are MCQs and gap fill. So if you would have seen the 3 countries that we have just discussed, the 3 composition is largely missing. The 3 composition is largely missing in these 3 that we have seen. So Indonesia, coming to Indonesia, the very interesting response I got for this. So whether the national education is centralized or decentralized. So it says that it's both centralized and decentralized. Centralized in that the government releases a curriculum which should be applied nationwide, but there's also some subject which is called by the name of local content. So the central government encourages the local government to decide what local content can be included in the curriculum, which local content is most relevant to the students in that area becomes part of that curriculum. So the grades that fall under secondary school, again, it's a 7 to 12 grades, and 12 to 15 years is the age group of students for the junior secondary school for grade 7 to 9, and for a senior, it is 16 to 19 years old for grade 10 to 12. The nomenclature for secondary education in Indonesia, it's junior high school and senior high school, and also vocational school under the Ministry of Education. There are two parallel education systems there, if you see. So under the Ministry of Education, it is junior high school and senior high school and vocational school. And under the Ministry of Religion, it is Islamic junior high school, which is called Madarsa Zanawiyah, and Islamic senior high school or Madarsa Aliyah. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it correctly, but there are two parallel ministries that run the school education there. So in coming to English as a compulsory subject in secondary school, yes, it is a compulsory subject there, and a public examination the students should take in junior high school is one, that the students take in junior high school is one, that is at the end of the school level, and it's the same applies for senior high school as well. Okay. So the skills that are tested, which we have seen, since there are two parallel ministries running this, the testing agency that's there is the Ministry of Education and Culture, and the benchmark, the international benchmark is CEFR that is followed, and the examination is conducted at the central level, and the question paper setter, which you've seen, is Ministry of Education and Culture. Evaluation process is centralized, and the question types are MCQs, the closed test, the gap fill, open-ended. So that's about Indonesia. Coming to Malaysia, the education system is rather centralized, and they follow the CEFR band in toto for school-based assessment of English language. The usual age group is 13 to 17, and it is Sijil Pelajaran Malaysia or Malaysian Certificate of Education. So English is a compulsory subject at secondary school level, and the number of public examinations, it's one, which is conducted by SPM, that is Sijil Pelajaran Malaysia, wherein the English paper, there are two papers, and the exams are conducted at the end of, it's 11th grade, which is called Form 5. And the skills that are tested, it's LSRW starting from 2021. With the new policy that they include all the 4 skills from 2021. The testing agency is Lembaga Periksasan Malaysia, which is LPM, or Malaysian Examination Syndicate, which is MES. So international standards, coming to international standards, the English writing paper is benchmarked against Cambridge Examination Centre. And the examination center is conducted at the central level, and the question paper setter is a panel of trained teachers who are recruited by Ministry of Education. The evaluation process is rather centralized, and again we have MCQs, closed test, and the writing paper is also there in Malaysia. So the listening and speaking are included in the public exam, to be included in the public examination starting 2021. The question format in Malaysia has changed significantly. The old format of English language papers, paper 1 and 2, did not have all the 4 integrated skills. Now coming to Thailand, the national education system is centralized, the same age group. There are 6 grades under secondary school, and on an average, the age group of secondary school education ranges between 13 and 18 years old. And there is no fixed nomenclature for secondary education, and it varies greatly from school to school, though there's a lot of Buddhist influence as well. And English is regarded as a mandatory subject in secondary school. And under secondary school, the 9th graders are required to take 1 public examination that includes Thai, English, maths, and science. And for 12th graders, there's 1 public examination that covers 5 subjects again, which is Thai, English, maths, science, and social studies, religion, and culture. Yeah, that's generally administered as well. So English is a part of public examination, And at the end of 9th grade and 12th grade is where they conduct the English exams. As far as the skill sets are concerned, the three attributes that are tested for the public examinations, they do test the language use, wherein grammar and expressions for communications are tested. They test writing and reading extensively. So this skill is writing, even when they test writing, they do it indirectly because the test takers are expected to read a passage and select the best connector or expression that fits a particular context. So reading, again, within this skill, students are required to find the main idea, specific details. So it's a reading comprehension passage, basically. The testing agency is National Institute of Educational Testing Service, which is NIETS, which is a public organization. So Thailand, the international standards or benchmark, if I talk about it, they are based on national curriculum. They do not proclaim that there's any, maybe a CEFR band or something that they adhere to, but then the constructs are designed based on the national curriculum. The examination is conducted at central level. And high school teachers and university lecturers recruited by this board, by this body, and NIETS are involved in the process of question setting. The process is rather centralized, but again here, it's only MCQs that they are tested in. So what I see majorly in many of these countries, the free composition, wherein the writing skills are directly tested, are missing. Though they say that writing skills are tested in terms of gap fill or close test, wherein one word is required, but in general, the free flow, the free composition, wherein the ideas and how the student is supposed to give voice to give words to his or her own writing is majorly missing there. Okay, so then again coming to India. Education system is rather centralized, 13 to 18 years old. I'll just quickly rush through some because it's the same everywhere, because I know the time factor is also an important aspect here. So it's already 3:20, though I started a little late, so I'll take the liberty of 5 or 10 minutes. And so India, we see the English is a compulsory subject, and public examinations at the end of 10th and 12th grade. The National Council for Education Research and Training is very prominent there, but the boards that the examining boards are CBSE, ICSE, or the state boards. And the international standard or benchmark, we still are not adhering whether to Cambridge or to CFR. So evaluation process is centralized. But one main aspect that I would like to point out here is, apart from MCQ, gap fill, free composition is also a major component here. Then now coming to, I'll just quickly take you through, coming to Singapore. Singapore is a very interesting study for English studies in secondary school, because all that one would like to have for a global, internationally acclaimed English test, all of it is taken care of in Singapore. I know the reasons are many, because other countries, other regions, when we are talking about multiculturalism, but here it is very well taken care of, and it's through starting. It's the Cambridge, which is predominantly, when we see it's Singapore, obviously it's centralized. I'm skipping on a few things which are very common in all 7th to 10th grade. Here they do not call 12th in a secondary school, it's 7th to 10th grade, 13 to 16 years. The two exams that they have, first of all, secondary education in Singapore, it has 3 streams. One is express stream, which is 4 years in secondary school, and one is normal, which is 5 years in secondary school, and technical as well, which is 5 years for those who really cannot study. So English is a compulsory subject in secondary school in Singapore, and in secondary 2, which is the 8th grade exam, students streamed into either science or arts on the basis of that exam. And in secondary 4, which is a 10th grade exam, it's conducted by the University of Cambridge and marked in UK. The evaluation is also done by UK. So all exams are done in English. Their medium of instruction is English. All 4 skills are tested. All skills are integrated: speaking, listening, writing, and reading. And grade 7 to 10, they have local exam, and grade 10, they have the exam conducted by University of Cambridge. So in exams, there are a variety of questions, a lot of open-ended, free composition, MCQ. So free composition is also tested there. And now coming to the last region here, like 9 we have to do, it's Hong Kong, which is again centralized. Both China and Hong Kong, mainland China and Hong Kong region, both have centralized system. So here the exams are TSA, which is territory wide system assessment. There are 2 public exams, territory wide system assessment at secondary 3. It is not a high stake exam, as student or individual performances don't count, and it doesn't have any immediate effect on students. Whereas the second one, which is DSE, that is Diploma of Secondary Education at Secondary 6, it is a very high stake exam because it determines whether individual students can get into a university or not. And only about 25 to 30% of the students can get into a local university. So students have to reach level 3 to be qualified for university entrance, and the DSE, as you see, have seen, is at the end of secondary 6. So Hong Kong, again, LSRW, all 4 skills are tested. Testing agency is HKEA, which is Hong Kong Examination and Assessment Authority, which is a statutory body of Hong Kong government. And the DSE results are recognized by most overseas university. Each year, about 10% secondary 6 students carry on their studies in an overseas university, usually in the UK, the US, and whether it's Australia, Canada, and more so now in Taiwan and China as well. So, and this is just Hong Kong that I'm talking about, the whole of China. And so, yes, there are some MCQs for reading and listening, but mostly open-ended questions are there. And task-based approach has recently come in, and especially for paper 3 on listening and integrated skills. Now, this is the quick recapitulation of what we have done till now. And what we see, the free composition, wherein the writing skills of students are tested. I do not have it's like 40 minutes, I cannot discuss the item analysis, though I've done the item analysis as well, which would be the part of the publication later. So the free compositions, if you see, it's very few countries which do talk about the free, which do test about the free composition aspect. And mostly it is MCQs. So when it is an objective test, when it is an MCQs, the learning, but then it's not any country isn't to be blamed. It's the when we look at the role of English in these countries, as the earlier speakers have also discussed, English as a subject or as a medium of instruction, it is very important. And the cultural diversity, the heterogeneity factor, the larger the country, the more diverse the issues are. There are different regions, different states, and different languages or different dialects that come into play. So English as a second language, English as a foreign language, and these issues of are varying in various countries. So there's some reflections, quick reflections as to what the study prompted as, like the test type, wherein whether it is used for an entrance that we saw in China and Japan, which was not done in any other country. There it was basically the achievement test or the proficiency test rather than the entrance test. Then the scale, whether it's a criterion reference test or the norm reference test, there also there were very many differences. The stakes, again, if it is a national agency, and if that how much of the stake is involved there, the stakes, when the stakes are high, the kind of questions or the kind of exam patterns or the low stakes in the or local scenario came into play. Then when we talk about the LSRW skills and the unitary competence, or whether we are testing those skills in a separated way, whether it's a divisible competence that we are testing. So the integrated skills are equally important, and Singapore emerged to be testing all these 4 skills in an integrated pattern. The test constructs usually followed these. The free composition, though, was missing from many of those. Just a second. I think, okay. So quickly coming to the last slide now. So it is when we talk about what are the recommendations, it's mostly when we are talking about, just a second. The curriculum, the skills, and the national bodies. So coping with the change, the suggestions for assessment reforms, the changes in the national curriculum should and it really should bring a change in the English test, which is not followed throughout, because there have been changes in the policy, there have been changes in the curriculum, but it has not been truly reflected in the test. Secondly, the skills and the testing for productive skills is equally important. Though we know that there are infrastructural issues, there are other issues when we have to test the speaking skills. Say, for example, in India, the listening and speaking skills are school-based. They are not tested nationally as in the same test being administered to all. They are done in the school, and even the reports are, it's just the marks that is sent to the board. It's more of a practical exam which is conducted at school. So how can ways or means be developed to test all the skills on a national or an international platform, and then comes the national body? So some independent quasi-governmental institution is needed rather than giving the liberty to the schools or the different regions. I'm sorry, I've crossed my time limit. That's it. Thank you.